Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. Today's guest, filmmaker Thom Zimny. We'll get to Thom in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we will read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. Let me tell you a little bit about Thom Zimny. He's an Emmy and Grammy award-winning filmmaker, renowned for directing, producing, and editing critically acclaimed documentaries about some of the greatest artists of our time. Recently, he's co-directed WILLIE Nelson and Family, which premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival and is now streaming on Paramount+. He also directed the HBO documentary Elvis Presley, The Searcher, Netflix's doc Sly, which explores Sylvester Stallone's 50-year legacy in Hollywood, and he co-directed The Beach Boys, which will premiere later this year. Thom's also collaborated with Bruce Springsteen for 25 years, which includes winning an Emmy for Outstanding Director for 2018's Springsteen on Broadway. And he's directed music videos for Bob Dylan and John Cougar Mellencamp. Thom, welcome into the back room.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk with you about your work and the documentary space, but I just want to take a few minutes and peel the onion back a little bit, take you back to childhood, little Thom, what your interests were. Like, there are some little kids who are into media and photography. Quite often we find that the people we talk with in their childhood, they did something or had interests that translated to what they ended up doing as a grown-up. So I'm curious if there was anything like that in your childhood, as well as where you grew up, what kind of family you grew up with, and were you exposed to any of this at an early age?
I think my initial connection in art came through just drawing, and that was the start of creating compositions and storytelling. And a big part of childhood and the connection to visuals was that I wanted to express myself, but I struggled because I was dyslexic, and that reading and writing were out of the areas of comfort. And when you have a connection to the world where you're trying to express yourself, as a child, I quickly stumbled onto the power of visuals, the power of light, the power of color. And one of my early moments of really stumbling upon what I thought was magic was getting a viewfinder, which was a small plastic cartridge that let you scroll forward film footage. And there, in the beauty of this little plastic cartridge, I could see edits happen, and I would play them forward and back, forward and back. And what that did was it unpacked the magic of editing, cinema. And also, also in my childhood, I would become deeply obsessed with a particular film, and it was the days before any sort of recording, and I would take a cassette player and put it in front of the TV set and record a movie if I really liked it, and then play it back. This is all tied to that early connection to cinema. This kind of behavior I look at now and I go, oh, I was already starting to edit and understand a place in the world through examining film, examining images. So I've really been able in the past couple of years to be a little bit more conscious about it. I think there was many years I didn't really put it together. And then I looked at it in the past few years, and I said, oh, actually, my first edit happened looking at footage through a viewfinder, playing it forward and forward. I had no direct family influences with art, but I had grown up in New Jersey in a small suburban town by the ocean, and had a wonderful melancholy to it in the winter months. And I would escape into the power of films and art. And my best friend's mom was this huge influence, was a powerful parental figure, because she supported this idea that you could create. She supported the idea of going to New York City seeing paintings and learning. She gave me a sense of a lifestyle that I ended up chasing through art school and the past 30 odd years being a New Yorker, now more bi-coastal, but this lifestyle of appreciating the arts and also trying to find a place in the arts that you could survive and communicate with an audience.
Isn't that wonderful to to have someone in your life like that who, at such an early age, served as a champion and an inspiration to something that paved the way for the rest of your life? You know,
it's huge. I turned to some sources that I've stumbled upon in my life that have, as I'm getting older, I realize they saved me. And also just, I had no comprehension in the moment of the mentorship that they were giving me, the time, the energy. There was a filmmaker who hired me right out of college, and his name was Lawrence McCaffrey. This filmmaker, I think about it now, I was 22 years old. I'm dyslexic. I have no film background. I'm struggling working in the straight world of an office, pre-computers in some ways. I can't type. And he kept me, and he let me sit around the edit rooms, and he also let me work on a poetry series that was taking music and words and putting them on screen. And he changed my life, because the work that I do with Bruce Springsteen, the recent film I did with Sly, I see shadows, I see traces of that influence, of that series, of my time working amongst directors, where it wasn't a space of traditional doc filmmaking. They were bringing scholars, they were bringing in people, but they're dealing with the abstract thing of poetry. And it definitely shaped me. And more than ever, I'm aware of the gratitude that I have towards people who gave me a moment and time. And in the past couple of years, I've really concentrated on working with a couple of individuals. So that sense of, there is a sense that mentorship is lost right now, and especially with assistant editors, where you're not passing on this secret language of film, this beautiful thing, composition and building a story. So I'm really conscious of trying to spend time and give back, because I feel lucky. This did save my life work in many ways, and these people were really important to me.
Well, it is so important, because it makes you wonder about all the people out there who have a certain leaning towards perhaps something in the arts, but dad was a lawyer and granddad was a lawyer, and so I am going to law school. And instead of having a mentor or a champion, you have someone who kind of pigeonholes you into a life that is just because, it's supposed to be, because that's the way we did it, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, I play the drums, but I didn't really pick up sticks until I was 32, because when I was younger, my parents were like, too noisy. And I always think, like, what if Ringo's parents said, hey, too noisy, right? We might not have the Beatles, So it's like, what if they had said, oh my God, he has musical interests, let's get him a drum set. And if I was playing since I was 8, what could I have been, right? So I think about that all the time, parents, teachers, other people in your life who can be there at that moment when you need someone to recognize in you what's different about you, right? What's other about you, especially in the arts, and help you blossom, help bring that out of you. And then, because as an artist, whether you're painting or writing or making a film or making an album, you're giving to the world. And it's a really interesting thing to think about, like how much content isn't in the world for all of us to enjoy, because somebody lacked a mentor or a champion,
Yeah, I have to say, I think about the power of people's words that way in my past. I'm grateful. I had this one editor I was working with, and he said to me, after viewing a cut that I made where I took a Bruce Springsteen song and a bunch of random footage and I cut it together. And he said that it didn't work. It showed no emotion, and I'm wasting my time with this because I'm relying on the power of the song and not the visual storytelling. And then he launched into a very clear speech of "you don't have it." And I hold that story out not as an active resentment of like, I made a life in film, but just an awareness of my gratitude that I used that to fight and go forward. He gave me this abstract gift because time and time again, I'll return to that moment and use it as a reference to, sometimes we don't know why we're chasing something. And 99% of the times, I really don't understand why I'm leaning towards this chapter in a film or this visual. And it plays out in the world. Why was I working with the music of Bruce Springsteen? It was creating an understanding, and I was connecting to taking music, his words and images, and I was on a journey. And this guy was summing it up in a way that could have changed my life course. It's really powerful that your words to young artists. And I think I've been very aware of when I talk to people who show me edits or show me ideas or discuss their direction of the power you hold in that moment.
Sure. No, I mean,
it's much like your parents,
Yeah.
you didn't pick up the sticks, and I look at that.
Or the studio executive who told Tom Cruise, "You'll never make it in Hollywood." It's crazy because it could go both ways. Not only do some people not have the champion or the mentor to recognize what's in them, but to your story, there are those who, when you yourself try to bring something out, they put you down for whatever reasons.
Exactly. I've been really, really, really fortunate working in the past 25 years with John Landau and Bruce Springsteen as forms of an influence, artistic influences and mentors. And in that, I started in this space of being an editor, and without any discussion, they brought me to this place of directing. And it wasn't something that we discussed. It wasn't a declaration, but they were taking me on this journey in many ways with the film projects where it was the natural progression. And that's mentorship is the best. When you're going through this experience, you're learning, and at the same time, you're not even aware of those changes until a couple of years down the road. You go, oh, wait a minute, I'm directing now. But I'm in a different space. And my brain is thinking in a different way. And I think a huge part of my appreciation when I think about that space of mentorship or influences in your life comes to the place of looking at how Bruce's approach to work and how I've collaborated with both Bruce and John on these films throughout the years. There's a work ethic there that I just love and I strive towards them. And also a ruthless editor of sorts, where you really push yourself in directions where you live with these films, and sometimes they're little painful chapters, but you end up, going to this place of the ruthless editing is, I think with Bruce's story, it's like there's been songs that have been big hits of his that he did not put on a particular album because they didn't serve the story. And that's been an influence to me throughout my life, where you have to stop and look at your story and let go of ideas or things that really work great, but don't move the story forward.
No, it's so true. I mean, I'm a big Springsteen fan, and the thing that I admire most is his ability to be inspired. Like I remember, with The Rising after 9/11, how he just put together this masterpiece, which tells a real story. I mean, that album is really a story. It's not just a collection of songs. And to take that tragedy, that catastrophe, and just sort of have it inhabit you the way it did him, where he turns out this incredible masterpiece. It's like artistry on a level I can't fathom.
Well, I look at it and I'm constantly blown away by the power of his writing, by the power of him stepping into the shoes of the particular character and getting details that are always, the rising, when you look at that song lyrically, just his description of the fireman going into the building and the metaphors that he uses with light and the senses and the details of like the tank's weight, the air tank's weight, like the power that he has in the editing and choices of what he reveals is incredibly cinematic and inspirational to me, because he pairs things down that you feel fully immersed, but at the same time it feels very light and subtle. You're in the journey of the song. So I look at that at times as a filmmaker, and the beauty of Bruce's sax solos is that you can sing them in your mind, you can hum them, you can go to them, but they're incredibly cinematic and not many notes, spilling all over the place. He has an approach to the work that has a simplicity and intensity that I look at sometimes with the filmmaking and I go, how can I pare it down in that Bruce space?
Yeah.
Abstract reference, but sometimes you create a piece that has a lot of editing and has a lot of different points of view, and then all of a sudden you land upon an image. With Stallone, I remember the beauty of looking at this wild horse, this old archival footage, and thinking about a story that Sly had told me that didn't end up in the film. But it was a story that I would listen to all the time, which was that he was crossing a lake with a horse, and he taught the horse how to get across this lake, and a horse could drown if you didn't love the horse and stay on the side of the horse, and you could feel its heart. And he's talking about this in such a powerful way that I knew his connection with horses was much more than the story. And every time I went to see him, I would go back to the horse and say, what's the horse about? Why did you end up doing? And all of a sudden you're chasing something, you don't know why. And then I find this wild horse footage that he describes that his father would buy cheap horses. And I'm chasing something that I don't know why I'm chasing it, but it's this gut thing that I hold on to. And I hope I never lose, which is, you don't have to completely understand why you're on a quest. And the film, the gods will throw you more and more, and then you can decide this was just an exercise to get to another place, or it belongs in the movie. And when I get to the place of Stallone, the horse metaphor was such a strong thing and deep connection to his dad that if I just passed by that one story as a tidbit and didn't hear what was happening between the words, I would have lost a giant part of the movie, which was his connection to that sport, his connection to his father, how it served in their lives at different points. So I guess what I'm saying is that you keep your eyes open for the details and try to stay open to the beauty of not having control, not knowing why. Like that's what I'm holding on to when I'm making these films, is that I'm going to arrive to Sylvester Stallone's house and I'm going to find out that he's moving. What does that mean? Well, that means something. It's change. It's okay. Let's think about how we want to film that. Let's think about how to play in the film. The gods have just thrown me this abstract little detail, and you got to look at it and see quickly, is this part of my story? Is this a moment that needs to be explored? And what is the magic in this? And I think I reference Bruce's writing because a lot of times you pick out a particular line and you go, why did he go there? But then you realize it tells the detail of that character so close. And I'm always keeping my eyes open for those lost details that could tell a bigger story.
Yeah, well, it's like being in the room. My co-producer on my film, Mark Levin, great doc filmmaker, he always says, follow the footage. You just follow the footage, you know? That's often, and it's
Yeah.
what you're talking about is just sometimes you show up with the crew and something's happening that you didn't plan for, but you got to go with it, and it may open up a whole angle that you never planned on. That could be one of the
Yeah.
best parts of the film. I want to jump back to Springsteen for a second. You mentioned the sax solos. I still think to this day one of the finest pieces of music ever is the sax solo at the end of Jungle Land. That is so beautiful in the way you've described, like how sometimes that can tell a story or the emotion and passion, and just that little piece, that little solo is just so beautiful. The way it just takes the song and just deposits it at the end. So Springsteen, you've worked with him for 25 years. How did that relationship start?
Started in the space of working on a project with HBO, which was called Live in New York. And I was hired to be an editor to work with this great director who's Chris Hilson. And George Travis was involved as Bruce's road director, tour director. And they brought me into the room. I didn't know anybody. And I was told that I was going to work on this concert at Madison Square Garden for 1 week. And I was going to build a few songs. And that turned out to be 6 months. And then it turned out to be 8 months. And then it turned out to be me being in the space and collaborating with John and Bruce in the room. Chris had returned to England and we had built a cut, and all of a sudden Bruce was in this world of new HD TV clarity. And he hated the look of that cold look, that the sterile details of early HD. Everyone was raving about it, but he was a man, you know, made an album on a cassette with Nebraska. You know, he understood that much clarity was taking away from the emotional content of the movie. And one of my early bonding moments was with both John and Bruce, was I came up with this way of putting grain, film grain, 35 millimeter film grain over the image, different percentages, 5% here in the wide, 2% on the close up. And it was softening it in a gentle way, not in effect. None of this you need to do now because the development of the technology, but that was our journey. And it was very much like a studio situation where Bruce was deeply obsessed. You know, when I made films about Born to Run, I realized I had a glimpse of it, of his intensity and focus with the Live in New York project, because he was not letting go until we came to a place that the concert could play in an emotional space that he felt happy with. And that started my journey. And I cut that concert and then went on to start to do music videos for him. And the first documentary I ever made and directed and edited was a documentary on Born to Run. And from there we've gone, and we've been in this place now where we're combining a lot of the different film genres. And recently I did a film called Western Stars, which had live music component, his voiceover, scripted voiceover, scenes in the desert. So we're combining the languages of a lot of the filmmaking styles, and it's doc, sometimes it's more narrative, it's more scripted. And each one of them has been an amazing challenge. You know, I am so grateful to have this journey with both John and Bruce, because I have had a chance to try to film and capture the magic of his live show. I've had times to work with music videos to step into the stories of those songs and tell his portray his world. And then in Springsteen on Broadway was one of the most intense and powerful experiences for me to go through, because you have a great Broadway show and you just want to take an ounce of that magic that you feel when you're sitting there. How do you do that? How does the camera play? And what's the audience's role? I mean, I've had thousands of hours of conversations with them on all the details. And it is something that has made my life really rich. And I'm so grateful for the journey, because the journey has been being near a lot of that music, and you take it in, like the way you describe Jungle Land and its power and how it sits in your life. I relate to that. And I'm in awe of the writing. I'm in awe of the music, but I'm just really blown away by the experience of being near it and working with them. Because each chapter, you end up in this space of stopping at the end of the project and looking at your own life. And it's such a great gift. Like when I worked on Western Stars, you can't help but take in the writing and the music and the whole experience and say, okay, how is this fitting with me? So that's, to me, the greatest gift of being a filmmaker and an artist, is that I get to survive in the world with this. And then I also get to learn. And then I also get to have these moments of gratitude that you can somehow express through being there for someone else, mentoring someone else, or there's just been some great people that I've worked around. Actually, Duncan Pettigrew. I don't know if you know Duncan. He was an assistant editor, and I think, yeah, I have a memory of him just becoming an editor and going off in the world. You have these things where you watch people grow, and to me, that's been a really big and healing part of the process.
So in the last 6 years, you've made Springsteen on Broadway, Elvis, The Gift, The Journey of Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson and Family, Sly, and now you're working on the Beach Boys. You need to sort of amp up, like pick subjects that people know about, like you keep picking these obscure characters of American pop culture. But I'm interested in knowing, like, how do you pick the subjects? Because the subjects you document and you make films about are so iconic. But how do you arrive at those particular people? I mean, obviously, you have a tendency to stay in the music space. That seems to be an area of passion for you, a genre that you enjoy. But how do you choose your projects and your subjects?
I look at, I look at the way I choose these things is that I recognize an artistic journey. When I'm looking at Willie Nelson, there's a big, full life. And that is something that I imagine I know a little bit about Elvis. I know a lot about Elvis. I know a lot about Willie. But at the same time, I know there's tons that I'm not getting. So I focus on this idea that this is a journey. And we're going to unpack this journey in a different way. And I'm not going to repeat the same Elvis stories. And I'm going to include a world that I didn't grow up in. Elvis didn't just suddenly shake his hips on TV and do this shorthand version of music and history. So I have this opportunity for myself to both study, learn, and also there's a bit of healing in it all, because I'm going to tell this story in a way that I hope that I can be as honest as possible. So I'm going to include as many details that get lost. In Elvis's world, the influence of race and music and growing up, I'm not going to repeat things about Memphis Mafia, cars, and other things. I'm going to go to the place of honoring the music that he grew up with in a real way. I'm not going to give 10 seconds to gospel music. I'm going to explain gospel music and unpack it in a way that I feel like I'm learning and I'm being honest to the film. Same thing with Willie Nelson and same thing with Johnny Cash. There's these moments that you come upon and it's like Johnny Cash played Folsom Prison. what does that mean? Well, this, and this has been said about it, but what does it mean to me? And a big part of it is that a lot of times the films that I have stumbled onto is that there's this universal thing of chasing a lost father, having music in your life as a healing force at an early age, and unpacking that story that gets past the iconic approach of they're a celebrity, they had these gold hits, they made gold hits and these gold records. Those details, like, there's no emotional connection, but that these artists have had traumatic and trauma-filled childhoods that they've come out to the other side through the power of music, art, film, whatever it may be, that they can stand before an audience and at times appear very heroic, whether it's Bruce or Sly, but also that they're much more than a celebrity, that they're artists on a journey. And my job is to make you feel comfortable with the artist of Sly that you love, but feel like just learn so much more about him. And in a weird way, that's like my life.
I want to ask you about Sly because it's interesting you bring that up. I love that film because I ever since I was a young guy watching Rocky, I fell in cinematic platonic love with Sylvester Stallone, like a lot of people. That character that he played in that film, which he wrote, it really was him in so many ways, and it was a very lovable character. In your film, the scene that got me so much was when he was talking about playing polo with his dad, who seems like he was such a dick. And so here, I don't know if this was what you were going for or what was behind some of it, but what I took away was like, you got Rocky, you got Rambo, right? But then you've got this human being who's sitting there and telling you the story, almost sounding like a little boy, so vulnerable and so hurt that he could not understand why was his father, the person who's supposed to love him the most, treating him this way. Like that became so powerfully clear through your film that Stallone is just, in so many ways, he's not the superhero, he's not the prize fighter, he's just like us. He's a guy who's probably come from some dysfunctional family shit. And that's what I tried to do with my film with Adrian, was to humanize her, tell people who she was. I got that so clearly from your film about Sly, and it was a side of him that I really didn't know before. So kudos to you, because I think that's what a really great documentary is supposed to do. It's supposed to tell us who these people are.
I thank you. And I have to acknowledge, I feel a deep connection to your doc. I didn't know her. I was in the world of film when she was around, and I remember the energy of her performances, and I deeply connected to the doc that you made in a way that I remember. I actually think there was a day that I was at this guy Dick Rogers' house, and she was filming in Lower Manhattan, and I also just remember the sadness with that loss. But there is a cathartic process that can happen in making these films. So when I'm telling Sly's story or the film, watching your film, you come to this place of understanding when the film goes to those difficult moments and in an honest way. And I think, to me, that's like the power of, for me, the power of working in this area is I deeply connected to Sly's story on many ways with my own life. That disappointment and that lack of connection to father is a theme that unconsciously pops up in a lot of the work.
Springsteen had that too, right? Springsteen had a very complicated
absolutely
with his father.
Very complicated, yeah. And there's a beautiful moment on Broadway. So, I just, I do think that it is this great gift that you're given this moment where you can sit before someone and not rely on the power of celebrity and find them in this place that they are trusting you and they can be vulnerable. And then you take that and you don't go to a salacious area. You go to a space that it inspires somebody or it makes them feel grounded in the world. It's storytelling, and it's it's a lot of it's unconscious.
Mm.
I don't want to, like, I don't unpack it this way until the film is done. And then I go, oh yeah, the whole horse thing I was obsessed with. I don't know why, but I kept going back to it. And it's a section in the documentary that people have gone to again and again, because you never get to see a celebrity at Sly's level stare into the camera and confess. And the way that the mind and the heart reads is completely honest and a little boy, as you described. So I think bring Good Sly's producer and Sly, because they gave me a lot of space and trust. And
well, that's clear. I mean, he is so. You mentioned the word honesty before. He is so brutally honest in that film, almost to the point where he comes off as a really sad character. He's at a point in his life where he's been through so many ups and downs, still vulnerable, still terribly insecure. I felt that way also with the documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I watched recently, this docuseries. Also very similar character, but when you can capture someone like that so raw, where they are giving you everything. Because sometimes you watch a documentary, especially a celebrity documentary, and it just, you sit there and you're like, this is so performative. Like there's a camera in front of me and I'm acting. Like they can't. That's their default. They act, right? With Sly, it like, and the choice of angles and close-ups, and he's one of those people also where his life is literally on his face, right? Like,
completely.
Like it's all there. It's like you could just, there's this dad telling him, and he's so cinematically fascinating, and it was just so gripping. It was so gripping to listen to him tell his life story in such a brutally honest way.
He stood before me, and the first time I met him, I knew right away that I was not going to put him in a chair. I was not going to have him sit down and watch a crew. So it was literally me standing before him, and we bounced around his office, his room, and he would go from subject to subject. And I had things memorized that I wanted to talk about, but I also was keeping up with Sly and his energy. The film really conveyed that to me when I started watching dailies. I was like, this is a conversation. And the power of someone's eyes and how the camera reads it, I think with Sly and also with Bruce, there's moments that you might want to interact or interject an idea or get to a question. And some of the early things I learned in filmmaking by being an assistant editor, an apprentice editor, and watching dailies closely is the power of letting things unfold. Your presence as a director doesn't need to be announced all the time. You can stand before someone and let them go on till you hear their voice have the musicality and the sound of honesty. And with Sly, I was very aware of the Sly voice that's a TV soundbite. And the same thing with other projects I've had where someone's been exposed to the chat show reality of telling a story that's quick, funny, and then tying it up. Those rhythms I'm very sensitive to. So if I'm in that kind of space where I'm hearing that, I go to something completely offbeat to get us in conversation, to get us talking. Because the last thing you want is that thing that you described, which is that controlled environment reality TV approach to, okay, there's a camera, I'm going to give you a bite, I'm going to wrap it up. It'll have a middle and have a beginning and a middle and an end. Big part of the dailies and going through the dailies is listening to these conversations, because there's a music in there and you want to tap into that. And with Sly, it was very musical. And all the other interviews that I did, Arnold especially, there is a feeling of it being conversational. Same time, your job as an editor is to harness in those rhythms so it doesn't feel disjointed. But you know, it was an amazing film to work on, and healing for me in many ways. It just touched on a lot of themes that I've thought about myself, and the relationships of father and sons, and the power of the art healing but not being everything, the journey of understanding your place in the world more and more as you get older, and realizing that this stuff will fade. What you can give your children in the moment, and just again, I was blown away by Sly's. For me, Sly's not sad. Sly's really holding out for this thing of hope. He returned to it again and again. He created characters that reflected a life that he never had. Mickey was a father figure that didn't exist in his life.
Right.
So he gave the greatest gift through his power, through his films and his writing, which is he went beyond his own experience. He created a world where there was things possible that you could never dream of. That a soldier can come home and find a place in the world. A boxer could win a championship, and also a bigger idea, love, a family, a place in the world, not be a bum. So, you know, Sly's gift is his happiness and his love and his sense of hope that he extends to us in the art. And for me, he gave me this great gift by being in the shadow for a little while and hanging out and talking. And
I think you also did a very great job highlighting his artistry, which I think has been, among many over the years, grossly underestimated or not given its props. He is a real artist. I mean, you know, I think you point out in the film that, you know, to create one successful franchise in Hollywood, let alone, you know, more than one. Like, so
yeah,
who does that?
Expendable, Rambo, and Rock, and the work ethic that he demonstrated around me was, you know, he was doing Tulsa King, and he's doing so many other different projects. This is a lifestyle that, you know, the reason he has 3 successful franchises is that he's never been satisfied with just a legacy that ties it up as he's only Rocky or he's only Rambo.
And he seems to have had an uncanny understanding of what the audience wanted in pure entertainment. No bullshit, 100%. No airs, this is just what's in my head, and I know what's in my head is what you guys want. And then he just, despite all the obstacles that were in his way, plowed through to make sure that shit ended up on a screen.
Yeah, I mean, the choices of Mr. T and you know, some of the casting choices, or how the narratives would go with the different Rocky sequels to this heightened pace. And he just said, it's different. It's entertaining. And he was challenged on so many different levels. And the doc, I got to explore how at times he fought that. And with the doc, I wanted to cover the things that I felt revealed an artist. I didn't want to chase every detail. The same thing with Elvis, same thing with Johnny Cash. And I feel like it's not my job to unpack every chapter. I'm telling a story. And that's what Wikipedia is about. And that's the beauty of everything available online is if you want to go into the details of someone's marriage, or how many times they were married, or what their downfall, or whatever you're chasing, that's available. But within the context of this film, I'm telling a bigger story. And I can say that for the other films too. with Willie Nelson and also definitely with Elvis.
What is it like? You've made films about the dead, you make films about the living. What are the inherent challenges or advantages of both? Do you have a preference? Is it more fun? Is it easier? What are the distinctions when you set out to make a film about a celebrity or a notable person who's gone versus one who is there to be your subject in the film?
It's a great question. I think I go back and forth to the illusion that, well, it'd be easier if this person was alive, or it might be easier if this was just not something that I had to unpack in the moment with this person still in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The brain goes back and forth in that conversation all the time. My favorite memory of working on a film with someone who's no longer with us was Johnny Cash. I made this cut and I played the cut and it told the story of Johnny Cash. And I'd been working months on the film, and I turned to my editor and I said, we've gone through and we have every recording of Johnny Cash, but I don't feel his presence. And I don't know what I'm going to do, because what I need now is Johnny Cash to arrive at the editing room door and tell his story to me. Everyone else is telling it and it's distant. And we only have moments of Johnny saying things. I'm missing the soul of the man. And the editor turned to me and said, you got to live with this. This is, this is everything we have. And I just said, no, and he's, no, we're in it. And I was like, no, this is not happening. This is, we're not there. And all the details were there. The story was there. The film moved. It felt like a movie. I was doing this interview, and at the end of the interview, the guy who wrote a book about Johnny Cash said, thanks for spending the time with me. I miss talking about Johnny. I actually sometimes even go to the basement, play one of the tapes just to hear his voice. I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, I have a box of audio tapes. When I made the book, Johnny had me stay with him and I recorded his life story.
Wow.
That next day,
the old box of found recordings. So many documentaries just get a gift
so many
like
docs,
that.
You know it. And that was the gift. And I cut the film.
Wow.
From scratch with my editor, Chris. And that was a moment where I felt like I was not getting at what I needed. All of a sudden I went from the space of an author saying, Johnny Cash had a tough childhood, to Johnny Cash saying, my father never hugged me.
Right. Wow.
And the film went to a whole other place. Once again, it's a great story of redemption through the power of the art, but also that idea of chasing a love of a lost dad.
And you're working on a Beach Boys film now. What is the theme of that going to be?
I worked on the Beach Boys film that'll be out down the road, and that was with Frank Marshall. And I was really in the space of ended up being a producer more, and that covers like the Beach Boys' life. I can't get into too much detail, but I'm always doing something with Bruce. That's my latest adventures. So maybe we can connect after that. I hope to have another movie with him out down the road.
And what is your view on the doc space today? Is it getting easier to make films and distribute them, in your opinion, or is it more challenging? Is it more difficult at the streamers? Are the streamers now focused too much on true crime? Is it getting narrower, the space?
I think filmmaking is really, really difficult at this point, and I think we're all trying to survive. And I don't see a particular genre as a threat, but I just feel like it's been a really difficult time since the strike, and I feel like that everywhere around me, we're trying to feel like a sense of change and security. So I think it's a really tricky time to figure out what films can be made and how, and I think I've got to stay and remain open to it constantly changing, and And there's a power in that because it forces you to look at the stories and the approach and the reality of budgets and just the vast amount of different platforms that can show your film. I had my film, Johnny Cash, on YouTube TV, and it ended up about 5 million people have seen that film.
No.
And that wasn't something I would even have even considered or thought as a possibility years ago. So I really try to watch what's going on, and I also just try to chase my gut story, the stories that I connect to, my gut.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at the genre of what might be popular in the moment. And I also I love the challenge of looking at somebody and saying, okay, this Willie Nelson's had 32 films on it. What could he said? Or Elvis, and then this sitting back and going, well, the Elvis film, they talked about aspects of his life that I have no interest in.
Mm-hmm.
No one's talking about the music. Let's talk about the music. And then all of a sudden I'm in it. And then all of a sudden this information is coming forward that just gets lost. And same thing with Johnny Cash. There's a lot of his journey that I could just tap into, that just sometimes things get repeated and condensed. That Johnny met Jane and everything was fine and that was it. That's the narrative. So you can just unpack a fuller journey. And I think the challenge is again and again in this market and in the world that we're in now is finding those interesting artists with long journey or story.
Mm-hmm.
Like Willie Nelson and Elvis, Johnny Cash, they've had these epic creative lives, and I look at it and I go, who else is out there?
Right.
That one.
Mm-hmm. Well, Thom, good luck with your upcoming projects. This has been
Thank
a
you.
fascinating conversation to me on many levels, and maybe you'll come back again when the Beach Boys comes out, and or the next Springsteen film. We'll talk about that.
That'd be wonderful.
Take care.
Take care, Evan. Bye-bye.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.